metrics grow, we will find that e-commerce companies will only become larger and bigger and better. The challenge, of course, if you're a young CA who is looking to make a career, is to figure out which is the right e-commerce company for you to join, because the mortality rate within this sector is also very high, which means that for every one company that succeeds, you could end up having 3 or 4 companies that probably fail, right? So you got to pick your company with some care. But as a sector, we quite like e-commerce for the opportunities that it offers to young chartered accountants. The second sector that we like is education, and the reason why we like education is because it's an annuity business. It's a business where once the kid is in the class, then pretty much you kind of expect to earn revenues out of him for the next 10 years, 12 years. If it's K-12, which is everything from first standard till 12th standard, and post that as well, if you look at college or university education and postgraduate education, in all these areas, opportunities for private sector education is only increasing. The government has now got a very big push on skills development, and they've formed a new organization called the National Skills Development Corporation, which is actually giving out soft loans to companies that are helping people to get jobs by improving their skill levels. So when you look at the nursery segment, where you've got large franchise companies like Eurokids, or you look at the K-12 segment, let's say a company like Ryan International, or you look at the post-graduation segment, where there are companies like Medasi into medical education. Each of these segments is quite an attractive segment to get into. Apart from the annuity cash flows for these businesses, what's also interesting is a very large profit margin. Many of these companies historically have been real estate plays, because basically it's set up by promoters who have bought land at a cheap rate and then built something, and they're making now money on the education side. But slowly we see a move away from that, and as better quality players come into the education sector, I think the opportunities, the qualitative opportunities for CAs will only go up. The other sector that we quite like is healthcare and wellness. Again, we like this for 2 or 3 reasons. One, over the next 15-20 years, as the average age of India increases. I mean, right now the average age of an Indian is below 25 years of age, so we are an amazingly young company. But what it also means is that in the next 15 years or so, we're going to have a lot of people who are going to be reaching the age of 40 or 45, which is when good quality becomes very important. The reason why we like this sector is because it's not a discretionary spend, so it's not as if people can decide whether they want to go to the hospital or not. I mean, if there is a requirement, you will have to go to the hospital. We are seeing increasing awareness among consumers for the need to take good quality treatment, and most importantly, it's also the spread of insurance, which means that more and more people have got access to good quality, affordable healthcare. So we like hospitals. We like device manufacturing companies, let's say stent manufacturers that are used for heart surgeries, for instance, or it could be things like knee implants or hip implants or shoulder implants. We like companies in the imaging space, in medical. We like diagnostic companies that carry out blood tests of various types. So there's a wide range of companies that are there in healthcare. In wellness as well, we like the space because of newer trends, like, say, for example, spas, or if you look at a company like Stepathlon that's into online wellness, there are now, or maybe a company like Goki, which is both a device as well as a service solution. We find that these are discretionary spends. Wellness is a discretionary spend, but there are more and more companies and individuals who are now willing to put a budget behind this. The fourth sector that we like is quick service restaurants. We like this sector for a simple reason, that the number of nuclear families is growing. The number of people who are living in cities is growing very rapidly. Women don't have time to cook, so you've got to look at, say, countries like Singapore, where it's completely usual or normal for a family to cook for the whole week, because Monday to Friday both the man and the woman are working outside and they eat outside, and cook home is done only on Saturday and Sunday. And I think this is increasingly becoming a trend in India as well. So QSR is a space that we quite like. The last space is financial inclusion and mobile payments. Financial inclusion, because it's government is pushing for it big time. They're trying to get more and more people into the banking net. Um, we also like the entire mobile payment space, because what we have seen is that the power is slowly moving in favor of handheld devices. India is going to be one of those countries where the desktop revolution has been completely bypassed, and it's gone. A lot of first-time internet users are actually using the internet on their mobile phones and not on their desktops. So mobile technology, which is combined with financial inclusion, is a space that we like. Now, the reasons why I've explained to you why some of these sectors we believe are high growth. In all high growth sectors, chartered accountants will always have additional opportunities. And why we say that is, apart from the regular accounting and MIS and the audit act there in every sector, every company, some of these newer industry domains have got a complication in the sense that their business models themselves are very volatile. So you typically have an entrepreneur or a CEO who is probably rethinking his business model every 3 months, 6 months, and that straight away brings into play the chartered accountant, because you are then needed to create scenarios, put together business plans, and help the promoter or entrepreneur think through multiple scenarios that go into the next 18 months, 24 months. The second reason why CAs will be in demand in these sectors is because of the need for fundraise. Especially if you're going to be in a space like e-commerce, where you're burning cash very rapidly, the entrepreneur will need to go back to a VC fund or a PE fund, and that's where he needs a chartered accountant to be able to look at the valuations and to make the investment memorandums and to accompany him for meetings with the investors. The third reason why we like these sectors is because they're not kind of operating in a cluttered marketplace, right? So if you look at old school education, there are several old schools, but some of the newer age schools which are there, they are operating in an uncluttered environment, which means that their ability to scale up their business, their ability to grab market share from the existing players will always be better. So as a young CA, you're probably better off in being with a company that's growing much faster as compared to its peers. There's a saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. So the same principle pretty much applies here. Be in a rising tide, and you will automatically see that you probably have a 30, 40, 50% edge over some of your counterparts who are working in more traditional environments. As I said, the only caveat is that you've got to be picking your companies with care. There's some risk in working with fast-growing companies. Some of these companies may end up actually getting folded up in the next 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, 24 months. Now that's a risk that you need to live with, because with high risk comes high reward. So as I say, there's no gain without pain. So do your due diligence on these companies. You need to be convinced about the business model. You need to be passionate about the business. But if you do these things, then chances are that you will be able to have a successful career in one of these domains. The second section of my presentation is about 5 skills that you should be focused on. So again, there are really 3 hard skills and 2 soft skills. So among the hard skills, I think the one thing that you should be doing is to look at IT enablement very closely. What I mean by that is, today a lot of chartered accountants are really more conventional or traditional chartered accountants, where they work in finance areas. But you've got to remember that most companies are looking for ways by which they can become more aggressive, they can become leaner, they can become more efficient and use lesser resources. So how do these companies do that? And that's by leveraging more and more IT. Typically, if we look at the success rate of IT implementations anywhere in India, you would see that the more successful implementations are done or led by chartered accountants. And the reason for that is simple, that there is no one better than a chartered accountant who can relate the business requirements and yet talk the same language as an IT consultant. This does not mean, I'm not suggesting that you should become an IT coder or a software expert. It's really about your understanding of business processes and figuring out how to get the work done from your IT partner. So stay on IT enablement. Technology is evolving very rapidly. The world is moving now to SaaS, which is software as a service. You don't need to do expensive products or licenses anymore. It's possible for you to do a subscription model. Even within the open source space, that is, if you don't take a very large ERP in the form of, say, an SAP or Oracle, it may be today's world is slowly now moving to open source solutions which are more use of PHP or Python. None of these things are really complicated. For a chartered accountant who's willing to spend a little bit of time understanding the technology side of things, I think will always be in demand going forward. The second space that we quite like in terms of skills is risk management, right? And why is, I'm sure you would have heard about the term VUCA, that is VUCA, which is a volatile, uncertain, complex environment that most companies in the world are operating in. So risks, there are a lot of opportunities, of course, but there are also enormous amounts of risks that companies are currently faced with. So chartered accountants are needed to help companies map the risk, measure the risk, and identify what is the right risk management strategy. In some cases, you simply buy insurance to protect the risk, but that's really more conventional thinking. That's very traditional thought process. Today's world, when you talk about risk management, it means risk avoidance. It can mean risk mitigation. It can mean risk transfers. Chartered accountants are being called upon to look at not just physical risks, like say a factory building or plant and machinery, but a lot of these risks today are really intangible in nature. So what do you do to protect yourself against loss of intellectual property? What do you do to protect yourself against loss of your reputation? How do I protect my brand? How do I ring fence my key employees? These are the kind of things that companies are grappling with. This requires a combination of a business understanding, a commercial mind, and a legal mindset, which again, I think chartered accountants are very well positioned to do. So look at risk management. I think this is a subject that will never go out of fashion. And if you, my call is that if you take a look at the next 5 years or 10 years, I think the world is only going to get more complex. It's going to get more riskier from a business and management standpoint. So I think this is a good area for a chartered accountant to be focusing on and building skills in. The third area that we like is financial planning and analysis. And this again goes a little bit beyond MIS, right? So, doing accounting, closing the books on a monthly basis, providing MIS to your investors and to the entrepreneur, to your CEO, is all I think of the past. The question is that how do you provide forecasting ability to the business on an ongoing basis? Question is, how do you leverage past data and yet look forward? How do you create scenarios that the businesses can use? How do you create scenarios that you can measure the businesses against? How do you know what is the right performance standard for your company? And most importantly, can you tweak your business plan during the course of the year? In other words, earlier we had a situation where companies used to do a budget once in a year, but today increasingly you find that companies are actually getting involved in a business planning exercise practically every month. Not because they like to do business planning, it just means that the world outside has got that much more complex, it's become that much more fast changing. So a chartered accountant's ability to play around with an Excel sheet, but not just the Excel, but to relate to the business, understand where the business is going, talk to different department heads, and put it all into a numerical framework, back it up with data, interpret the numbers, and then present it to management with a recommended plan of action is what companies love about chartered accountants. So this, like risk management, I think is an evergreen. The need for this is growing, especially with the focus on data analytics and big data. Companies will start to focus on this more than what they've done in the past. So this is an area that you should actively consider getting into. There are two soft skills which I think will be important. One is in an increasingly globalized world, you are probably better off learning a few languages outside of English. Consider Chinese, consider German. I think China and Germany, in my view, personally, are likely to be the industrial, the business, the commercial powerhouses the next 10, 15, 20 years. So you'll probably be better off in picking up some of these languages especially if you are thinking of a global career. The other skill which is becoming absolutely important is project management. And a lot of people think that, oh, this is easy, it can be done. But let me tell you, today the biggest gap, I think, in India, and particularly with the chartered accountancy profession, is a massive divide between the intent and the result, right? So companies intend to do something, chartered accountants intend to do something, but what is it that you actually derive at the end of it is a big question mark, right? I think there's a massive gap. In every company, there is a gap between intent and actual implementation. The only way this gap can be minimized by smart project management, which means someone needs to be on top of the project, make sure that your deliverables are broken down into smaller deadlines, and make sure that the various people involved in the project are all aligned to the organizational objectives. You manage your constraints well, you take into account the change scenario in the world outside, and go out and get to your goals. Okay, just staying on top of projects to make sure that they get to their desired outcomes is, I think, a job that chartered accountants are well suited to do. It's one of those things that does not require a functional expertise, right? It could be done by a manufacturing, but I think it's a space that CAs are, I think, better equipped to manage, and this would be a very useful skill. I also believe that increasingly in the world outside, particularly with outsourcing becoming such a favored option, you will find that chartered accountants, particularly the smart ones, are really working more on a project basis. So you could be full-time with a company, but probably the more exciting pieces of work that you're doing are really project-based jobs. So you're kind of working on something for 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, and then you're kind of moving on to the next project. So this would be a useful skill for you to hold on to. So we saw the 5 industry domains: e-commerce, education, healthcare and wellness, QSR, financial inclusion, and mobile payments. There are 5 skill sets. There are 3 hard skills, which is IT enablement, risk management, financial planning and analysis. 2 soft skills, which is project management and languages. We now move on to the third section of the presentation, which is about what you want from your career, right? And this one is the easy one. I'm sure that if I ask any one of you as to what you want, the answer will probably be all of this. So, which is remuneration, learning opportunities, stability, visible brand, working conditions, growth opportunity in terms of designations or increased responsibilities, the size of impact that you can create in the organization, the size of the organization itself, and finally, the flexibility that you have for future moves outside your current employment. Now, in an ideal world, you will want everything. But if you need to make a choice, you need to really introspect and be clear about the trade-off that you're willing to make. There is really no dearth of opportunities in the market. But let's face it, how many jobs do you need? You just need one job, right? And we're all kind of waiting and working towards that one perfect job. But the reality is that there are many perfect jobs out there. A lot of us have got challenges in finding it. I'm not so sure whether the problem is on the supply side, that there aren't enough jobs going around. I think the challenge is that sometimes we are not clear as to what we want. It's easy to say I want everything, but we all know that practically that's not going to work. So this is really a journey within yourself where you got to ask yourself as to who you really are at the core of your being. What motivates you? What makes you get up from your bed in the morning and go to work? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years or 10 years? What are the things that you're really passionate about in life? And when you get answers to these questions, I think the prioritization of the list of points up there will automatically sort itself out. And that clarity will make it easier for you to make a decision on which company you should be joining. In other words, what he's saying is, don't be tactical about your choice of career. Don't be opportunistic. It's very easy to say that, look, there is somebody who's paying me something more, so I'm going to jump and let me move on there. I don't think it's a very smart idea. You got to take a 10-year view of your career and stick to your choice. Clarity in your mind is possibly the best thing that you can do to getting a dream job of your choice. Let me now move on to the fourth section, which is about what simple steps you can take to fast track your career. So I guess all of us will agree that fast tracking career is important, but I thought we should kind of put down some small tips that you can go back and actually implement so that today's webinar can actually be useful to you. So firstly, network inside and outside your company. Okay, a lot of accountants are very guilty of only talking to other accountants within the company. Don't do that. I think go out, go to the shop floor, meet people outside the finance department, catch up with your board, catch up with your CEO, go and talk to your purchase manager, your admin guy, and there's always something to learn by doing that. Don't forget to network outside your company, right? So what you should be doing is to attend training programs or networking sessions that are being carried out either by the CA Institute of India or by an organization like say CII or FICCI or MyCFO does some of these events. So you should come over, just catch up with people and figure out what is it that they're doing, right? It's always a good idea to meet up with people who are outside the company because their perspective in all probability will be different from yours. The second bullet I think is quite critically important now. Be visible on social media, particularly Twitter and I think especially LinkedIn, very important platform for you. So it's quite possible that a lot of us are very active on Facebook. What is more important is to be active on LinkedIn. Seek out, make new connections, write your thoughts on LinkedIn, read articles on LinkedIn. I think there is some phenomenal stuff out there in terms of learning that is possible. A lot of people say, oh, I don't have time. I think it takes 20 minutes every day. If you've got an internet connection on your smartphone, just download the LinkedIn app, download the Twitter app. It doesn't really take more than 15-20 minutes when you're traveling even to catch up with what's going on. Believe me, this is one of the best investments you can make in yourself, not just in terms of adding connections, but also in terms of adding more knowledge and more perspective to your own self. The third tip that we have is to be aware of new opportunities within your company and put up your hand, right? So every company needs volunteers for new opportunities. And usually people are afraid, right? They're kind of thinking, what if I fail, right? But you've got to recognize that it's a new thing for everyone in the company. So the degree of risk in failing with a new project is actually the minimal because people respect you for the fact that you're trying to do something different. People respect the fact that it is new for everyone. So if you fail, so what? But if you succeed, I think you're going to be an absolute hero within your organization. So when it comes to volunteering for new jobs, do put up your hand. The other thing that you should probably look out for is to deliberately seek out difficult jobs, right? So it looks like a crazy thing to do. I mean, why would you go out and look for difficult jobs? But pick up the difficult jobs. The reason is it stretches you, it pulls you out of your comfort zone, it will hone your skills better, and it just makes you a stronger person. It just gives you a better CV. So look for difficult jobs. If things are becoming too easy for you, I would actually be worried because it just means that probably the learning of the job is not enough, and which probably means you're slowly getting out of date, right? So seek out new jobs. Do something new every month, and this is not just on the work front. Either you're reading a new book, or you're learning to swim, or you're going off on a hike somewhere, or do something new every month, right? Something that you haven't done before. The reason why I think this is important is that a good quality of a learner is not just somebody who's learning new finance and accounting skills. Learning doesn't come automatically. Unless you are a learner by heart, unless you are a learner by nature, it's very hard for you to be a learner only in finance and accounts. Generally, people who learn new skills outside of finance and accounts also tend to have a better rounded personality. Soft skills, as you're well aware, is as important, if not more important than hard skills in today's world. So keep trying your hand at something new. Shortcuts don't work. Consistent performance. So I think a lot of us try and put a spin, try and put a positive communication on some of the things that we do. Nothing wrong with that. But let's remember that that's not really a substitute for hard work and performance. If you're a good performer and you're confident in your abilities, eventually I think any company, any good organization will notice you, right? So no substitute to consistent performance in terms of fast tracking your career. Stay relevant, stay up to date. I think we kind of covered this a little bit earlier. Keep thinking every day in the morning, how difficult is it for my company to replace me today? If it's very easy for the company to replace you, then chances are that you will get replaced. Let's face it, there is no concept called permanent employment in today's world today. Although you may not be working on a project basis or a part-time basis in your company, maybe the employment contract says that it's kind of valid for a year and it'll get renewed, etc. End of the day, any company will retain an individual only as long as you stay relevant, right? So you've got to stay relevant. You have to keep asking yourself the question as to what stops the company from recruiting somebody who is probably 4 years less experienced than me and maybe at 50% of the salary, right? And if the answer to that is yes, a company can replace me, then probably you're in some trouble, right? You've got to kind of take some steps quickly to make yourself relevant and more indispensable within the organization. Be careful how you do it. Trying to be indispensable through information arbitrage, by holding on to information, by not allowing your subordinates. These are not things that are appreciated in companies anymore. So you've got to be constructive about the way in which you become indispensable for your organization. Last section, some do's and don'ts in your CV, and these are really more intuitive, so I'm not going to spend much time on this. We come across CVs that actually look like novels or books. I mean, you got to respect the fact that the reader does not have much time. If your CV is anything more than 2 pages long, then I think you really lost the recruiter. Some very silly things that people do is to kind of have long conversations with the recruitment agency or with the new company during office hours. I think it conveys a very bad impression. Try to circulate your CV using the BCC option is again a very bad thing to do. Never leave a company on a bad note, right? So sometimes there can be issues around notice periods, your boss is being very difficult about relieving you. These are all things that happen at the time when you're trying to leave the company, but don't try and leave a company on a bad note. I think it's a small world. You may end up needing your boss to give a reference. It never helps to have someone who's talking ill about you, right? So make sure that you maintain your relationships. Don't be afraid to ask questions in an interview, right? If you're not clear about the job description or the offer terms, in fact, most companies today would take it as a negative if the candidate does not have a sensible question to ask to the interviewer, right? It doesn't mean that you should become the interviewer and end up asking a lot of questions to the recruiters, but do ask meaningful questions about the job scope. I think it's an important step, mainly from your standpoint, and also to kind of convey the right impression to the recruiters, right? So provide clarity and seek clarity. So with that, I think we come to the end of the points that we wanted to make. We're very happy to kind of take questions. So if any one of you has got a question, you can use the question tab. You can just click on the question mark and actually write in the question to us, and we'll be very happy to take your question.
Thank you so much, Venkat. We have certain questions which I will just read out, and you can share your views on them. The first question is, what are the career options for CAs in smaller cities?
I'm sorry, Megha, I couldn't hear that question. Can you just say it again?
Sure. The question is, what are the career options for CAs in smaller cities? Was that audible?
So I think that's a tough one. Okay. Yeah, that's audible. So I think that's a tough one. So usually we see there are two traditional choices, right, that people make. One is to start your own practice and become like a chartered accountant, serving small and medium-sized enterprises, some partnership firms. So that's one route. The other route is there are probably 5, 10, 15 large companies in the vicinity of your city. So obviously the job scope is very limited in the city, but you probably get employed with one of those 10, 15 companies. right? I think that there are two or three things that I can think of. One is if you're willing to make the move, I think it makes a lot of sense to actually move to a larger city, right? So today when we recruit from say a tier 2 town vis-a-vis a tier 1 town, the differences in salary are sometimes to the tune of 100%, right? So if you look at say a chartered accountant with maybe 5 years of experience, uh, maybe in Mumbai a range could be, I'm just throwing up a range, could be anywhere from maybe 12 to 18 lakhs. But it could probably just be half that number. I mean, in a smaller town. So I think that purely from a remuneration standpoint, you are probably better off moving into a larger city. If you're not able to make the move to a large city, then you will have to look at some kind of an online collaboration, maybe with a large CA firm that is willing to outsource work to you, and you become a bit of a back office. So as long as you've got a decent team and you've got some infrastructure and a good internet connection, maybe that's one way to think about it. Maybe you act as an outsourced accounts department for a larger company, which is say maybe situated in a Mumbai or a Delhi or a Bangalore. And we see some people doing that. So one of our affiliate firms, AP Doshi and Company, actually operates an outsourced back office in Konkan by prices of only 150 kilometers from Mumbai. So I think that from both a professional achievement standpoint as well as from a remuneration standpoint, I do think that the opportunities are really concentrated more in the large cities. So you'll probably need to kind of do something out of the box, like an online collaboration, if you want to try and make things work.
All right. The next question is, which global avenues can an Indian CA explore?
Okay, so I think today there is really no restriction in terms of where you can go. Usually an Indian, see, traditionally the thought was that an Indian CA is probably going to be welcomed more in Commonwealth countries, which is a common system with the UK. So whether it's UK, Australia, or the English-speaking parts of Africa, the thought was that Indian CAs will be able to do well, and I think they have done a very good job. Then I think the action slowly shifted to the US, where a lot of Indians went and they kind of took up a CPA degree, and then they did very well in that system as well. So today, I think as a global template, there is really no one area or region where CAs are doing well or not doing well. I think it's a very I think it's a wonderful degree because it's really a global passport. I mean, of course, there may be some local degrees that you may need to take or some extra papers you need to write, but I think that's just part of the game. I mean, it's once you crack the Indian CA exam, then most people can pass virtually any other exam in the world. I think from a future standpoint, probably I would think that Southeast Asia, countries like Philippines and Thailand and Vietnam probably give better than market average opportunities because these are all countries that are in growth phase. They're not very organized. Quality of local talent is not great, and Indian CAs I think have got a head start in places like this. The same also holds good for several countries in Africa where local talent is not really up to the mark, and there is dependence on external professional talent. So one should look at this. I mean, of course, there's this massive temptation to kind of move to a US or a Canada, which I think is good. It's good for people who are looking for a stable career and looking for a great work-life balance, and looking for safety of the families, and so those kind of things. I think countries like the US or anywhere in Europe or Australia still continue to kind of hold a lot of interest. But in terms of the professional work satisfaction, probably there are more tougher problems to solve in some countries in Africa or Southeast Asia.
All right. The next question is, which sectors have a great demand for chartered accountants?
I thought I answered that a little bit earlier in the webinar. So as I said, e-commerce or hospitality, QSR, healthcare. I mean, these are sectors that we like. I mean, the traditional employers have always been sectors like FMCG and pharma and oil and gas, where I think, and of course, you should not forget the entire professional services sector, which is all the big four, the EY, KPMG, Deloitte, and PwC. They all continue to be large recruiters. So this is where a bulk of the chartered accountants end up going. And I'm sure that that would be the case going forward as well. I think what we are trying to cover in the webinar is some slightly unconventional opportunities, but still they are becoming more and more mainstream, where a young CA probably does not operate at a disadvantage. So the reasons why we pick these sectors, just to take a minute on that, is see today, if you are a 5-year senior accountant and you're going to be in a big four, I mean, there are several other people with more than 5 years or at 5 years experience, and the competition is very intense. If you go to probably the QSR sector, I think you will find that the population is much lower, and companies are willing to give a 5-year CA the opportunity to do a job that maybe outside is available only to a 10-year CA. So effectively what it happens is that it knocks out the advantage that some of the more experienced people may have. It puts everybody on a common start line, and I think it makes sense to run a race where you are on par with the next guy, rather than trying to run a race in a crowded field where there are already 100 people in front of you. So of course there is safety in the crowd. So if you want to pay for safety, then probably you are better off kind of joining an FMCG or pharma. But if you're looking for excitement, faster growth opportunities, possibly a level playing field, then maybe some of the newer sectors is what you should be looking at.
All right. The next question that has come in is how important is the Big Four experience?
Depends really. So I think the Big Four experience is something that's interesting, and I can talk about this from personal experience. I think it's phenomenal. I think in terms of exposure to good practice, exposure to very good quality clients, you understand the latest in audit, tax, in mergers and acquisitions. I think in terms of the quality of experience, nothing in my view to beat a Big Four. If you are looking for a long-term career with a multinational or with a large Indian company, then I think a core experience is absolutely a must. I think it gives you a much better head start in life as compared to doing it from a smaller firm. If your goal is to get into practice yourself and you're looking to kind of manage, say, tax, and you're looking to do more work with, say, family managed businesses, then a Big Four experience is still useful, but may not be that relevant or useful to you as if you were to be joining an MNC. So I think it's a question that can be answered if we only know what your long-term plans are, right? If you're looking to be in an MNC crowd, yes, by all means, you should be in a Big Four. If you want to be the partner of a large firm, then I think Big Four is absolutely the place to be. I think you should get in there and kind of try and make it to partner by the age of 30 or 35. But if you want to kind of get into your own practice eventually, or if you are really wanting to serve more small to mid-sized companies, then maybe it's not going to be as critical to have a Big Four name on your CV.
All right. The next question is, what, according to you, is a good CTC for a fresh CA?
Okay, again, depends on which city you are in and where you run your articleship from. I mean, I think that anything less than 5 to 6 lakhs at the bottom end of the range should not be accepted by you. I think you should at least put a tag of 5 to 6 lakhs on your CV. Yeah, so I would say maybe 4.5, 5 lakhs at the bottom end. If you've done your articles from a small firm, if you've done it from a Big Four, then I would imagine that the salaries could be 7 lakh, 8 lakh, 9 lakh. Really depends on again what kind of equation you have with your boss and stuff like that, right? So I would kind of put the range as between 5 and 10 lakhs.
All right. Moving on to the last question for the webinar. What are non-obvious career opportunities a CA can explore?
I think, one career opportunity we didn't talk about is to become an entrepreneur, and I think that's a non-obvious choice or an unconventional choice. A lot of opportunities today, frankly, for chartered accountants to do a number of things. So I think smart people who are willing to really bend their back and work hard and accept uncertainty for 2 to 3 years in their lives, my recommendation would be that think about becoming an entrepreneur. If you love being your own boss, if you love creating value, if you like serving clients, nothing like being an entrepreneur. So I think that conventionally we have always thought of CAs doing two things: either they go into industry or they end up going into practice. And within practice, they either do a big four or they do a large, or they could do a small Indian firm. But I think we should add three, which is entrepreneurship. We should also think about what we do at MyCFO, which is to get into shared CFO services. So I think that's an exciting opportunity as well, which falls between working in a big four and working in the industry. So you have all the advantages of working on practical business situations like you have in the industry. So we are not a consulting firm, but equally you have the fun and the experience, the learning opportunity of a big four, in the sense that you typically tend to work with multiple clients over your career at MyCFO. So think about a career opportunity in a shared CFO services firm. So if your goal is eventually to kind of be a CFO, and you want to fast track your growth towards a CFO, and you're kind of really putting a premium on the learning opportunity, then working in a shared CFO service could be an alternative. So I got two out of the box or unconventional thoughts for you. One is joining a shared CFO services firm, and second is to turn an entrepreneur yourself.
All right. Thank you so much for that insightful session, and thank you all for participating. If you have more questions about career options and would like to discuss it further with Venkat, you can reach him on venkat@wealthtree.in. That is VENKAT@WEALTHTREE.IN. If you want to know more about MyCFO and career opportunities in shared CFO services, please write to Deepika Mehrotra at talent@wealthtree.in with a CC to venkat@wealthtree.in.
Megha, I just lost you there. I heard you give out Deepika's email ID and then it just kind of gone off.
Yeah, I just said that if anyone has any more queries about career opportunities in shared CFO services, they can write to Deepika Mehrotra with a CC to your ID.
Okay, cool.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.